So for those of you who are joining us, our next presenter is Miles Montalvo, and he is going to be presenting on oral histories for 2020. So I'm going to turn it over to Miles now.
Thank you. So this is actually my second capstone. I did one last year on creative writing, and this one I did on oral histories. Now, okay. So as for what an oral history is, it is a collection and study of historical information using sound recordings of interviews, and it will generally draw from people's experiences from the past. So it's an interview type study. As for why it's important, I'd say you have to really look no further than the events that are transpiring right now in society. I mean, you can honestly look anywhere. Sorry, that's my insulin pump. You could honestly look anywhere in the world right now and see something that needs to be recorded, something that needs to be remembered. And I think that oral histories sort of bring this sort of aspect into recording history and understanding history that's really important in our current society right now. So and as for oral histories, like I would conduct these interviews, and then after that, I would sort of have all this information, and all this information from the past is really important. And I sort of broke down why the information was really important into these three main sort of concepts. The first concept is remembering the past. The second concept was recording the present, and the third concept was preparing the future, so that in the future, people will be able to learn from the past mistakes. So we're going to transition to the three benefits. So I really like to break down the three main concepts or three main beliefs of oral histories, just to help flesh out why my project was important and why the things that I did were important. So so for oral histories, if you I like the idea of remembering the past, because if you can remember the past, then you can prepare yourself to not make the same mistakes in the future. You can hopefully make it so that you don't repeat history, and you'll be able to be proactive in sort of changing history and sort of making the correct decisions in the future. As for recording the present, I mean, I'd say, like, with all the protests for the Black Lives Matter movement and all that sort of social justice warrior sort of concepts that are going on right now, I'd really love to even interview some of those people to sort of get an idea of how they are feeling and sort of get the emotions of the people that are going through this large crisis right now. As for, like, recording the present, you could take that and maybe 20 years later, you wouldn't be able to capture the same emotions that these people are feeling right now. So oral history sort of work in that sort of manner as so basically, if you prepared for the future, you're able to draw on these sort of concepts of oral history and be able to prepare yourself for not making the same mistakes, sort of prepare yourself for being proactive when you're making decisions in the future. I can't really, am I supposed to be able to see my camera while I'm presenting, or no? Do you know?
No, you should just be seeing what you're sharing on your screen.
Okay.
It looks all fine on my end.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So before we talk about the interview, or we talk about the project as a whole, I want to do a quick breakdown of the process, sort of refresh or just sort of explain what I would basically do. I already talked about how my last capstone project was a creative writing one, and I really had a sort of set structure where I would, write every day, whereas this one was a little bit more spread out. It was a little bit trickier to sort of keep everything going at the same sort of pace, but I mean, I'm here, I'm presenting on it, and it was sort of a fun experience. So, so it was a little more spread out, a little more here and there, but the project really came down to sort of, in the beginning, I had to study what oral histories were, had to figure out, different styles of interviewing, different styles of present, or different styles of talking to people, sort of like trying to make people open up to you. So it was sort of an interesting sort of psychological study in the beginning. And I'm generally good with talking with people, so it wasn't that big of a stretch to go out and interview these people. Yes, and then one of the other things that was also helpful was the people that I was interviewing weren't necessarily complete strangers to me. So I've sort of had that sort of basis to begin with. But still, you're talking about people, asking them about their lives, about their childhood. So it's a little bit more emotional than.
Miles, I think you might be frozen. If you just want to.
Childhoods,
Oh,
people's.
you're good now.
Huh?
I was just saying, I think you were frozen for a second, but you seem to be fine now.
Oh, could you hear my voice or no?
For 1 second, I couldn't, but you're good now. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay.
So my hope was to sort of create this website where I could sort of compile all my information and take the transcripts and take the voice recording and sort of put this on this website, but I didn't end up finishing it. I'm struggling getting my voice memos from my phone into my website. It's a little bit confusing, but I hope to get that done over the summer because I kind of want to show the people that I worked with, this is where your time went. This is where your opening up sort of went to. I want to obviously maybe not have the website public or whatever, but sort of have a web page where I could show people. But I want to do that over the summer. I think it would be interesting. I mean, besides the fact that, the summer is going to be pretty hectic with all the college applications and essays and tours and, going to soccer camps and whatnot. But I feel like it's a work in progress, and I'll hopefully be able to get that done in the future. All right. How are we doing? All right. So as for the project as a whole, I really focus on people's childhoods. I focus on people's sort of transitioning from high school to college. And this really brought out a really diverse and sort of intricate series of just concepts and ideas. It was really cool because I sort of tried to compare me transitioning, going from high school to college. Next year, I'm a junior going to be a senior. And I sort of focused on how the transitions were for my grandfather, my grandmother, and my next door neighbor, who I've known for years. So what I gathered from these people was basically that everyone's pretty similar, even though they come from different areas or they've had different experiences. My grandfather grew up on a farm up in northern Connecticut. I don't remember the exact place, but he actually, well, he lived in a place on a lake that was considered a rich sort of area for the people that lived there, and so he actually ended up getting no financial aid for his college, and the woman who was the guidance counselor for financial aid actually ended up coming later in the year, and he told me about this one during our interview, and he said, she ended up coming for a puppy, and she said, oh, I thought you were rich because you lived on the lake, but that was completely not the case. And in fact, he had to hold 2 or 3 jobs just to maintain his college. And so it was really interesting. And then as for my neighbor, as for the interviews with her, she talked about how she was one of 13, and so she had a different experience than obviously my grandfather. And as for my grandmother, she came from Puerto Rico. She didn't go to college. So that was a completely different sort of aspect of the interview. She talked about how, well, a little bit on how she was a single mother, raising 5 kids in New York. So that was different. But, it sort of was really cool to see all these different lives of these people and sort of be able to, these people that I know, obviously, but was able to sort of connect with them in a strange way. So it was really cool. That was a really cool part of the project. And I like this one because it was sort of factors in because it was sort of eye-opening for me. I got to see a new side of my family, got to see a new side of the people that I've been near for years now, and it was really, I mean, I can't boil it down more than it was eye-opening, but it was pretty interesting to just be able to see people's lives in a different manner. Yeah. All right. Sorry. And then we're going to go to this one, which is the main things I learned. And so I kind of like this one because it factors in with some of the research and some of the interviews that I had, where I sort of tried to pull out some of the main factors. And my grandfather heavily stressed the financial aid aspect, sort of figure out where you're going, how you're going to get there, idea, because obviously he didn't have that sort of support system. He had to work quite hard for his college. So that was an interesting aspect from it. And then from my grandmother, she said, go somewhere where you want to go. But she heavily stressed that she wanted me to come over to California, where she's living now. So had to really take that one with a grain of salt because of obviously her trying to recruit me over to the West Coast. And then I had another one, which was I pulled from my three interviews, which was make sure you prepare yourself for the future ahead. And I sort of like to pull off the one of the interviews, or one of the questions for the interviews was actually my mentor, where she talked about how she was a French major and she was going to be teaching French. She could speak fluent French. Her whole thing was set up to be, she would like have her grandmother would sing French like nursery rhymes or whatever to her when she was a child. So she was all in this French, and then she ended up taking a class in her like last year of college that was reporting or something. It was a really cool reporting class, and she ended up completely changing her major and whatnot. So it was sort of reinforced that idea of, make sure wherever you're going to go, wherever you want to do, you're setting yourself up for the best possible scenario. So that was cool. And yes, and then I like this quote because I don't know, it sort of factors into my project. I did a lot of research on how to take my information that I was learning about, or from the interviews, and sort of analyze it. And so I did I came across this quote when I was doing some research, and it says, it's basically talking about, and I'm not going to read it exactly, but it says basically if you were able to pause in the moment that a ball was coming at your face, well, you would know the ball was coming at your face because you'd be able to see it, right? And you would be able to react to it because you were in that pause state where you could observe what was going on around you and sort of change your trajectory, change how you're focusing on it. And it sort of factors into how important history is to reacting to certain events that occur, right? If you're able to see an event, if you know about an event that's very similar, that's taken place in the past, then you'll be able to react to that event in the present. And so that factors into what oral histories really are important about. I mean, we're taking information, recording it, writing it down, and preserving it for the future generations. So I thought that was really cool. Now, I want to see if this works because, hold on. This is a video. And it's by the Smithsonian Museum. Let's see if this works. Yeah. Now, I'm going to play a video. This is actually something my mother sent to me during the research process, and I thought it'd be really cool to include during this presentation. So let's see if this works.
I'm Hannah Byrne. I'm a historian here at the Smithsonian Institution Archives, and we're going to run a few steps so you can start doing oral histories at home. What's oral history? It's a method of interviewing we use to preserve the voices, memories, and perspectives of people in history. It's a tool we can all use to engage with and learn from family members, friends, and the people we share space with in an interview that captures their unique history and perspectives in their own words. To start conducting oral histories at home, let's run through 5 easy steps. Step 1, ask someone if they'd like to participate. Living with a grandparent right now, want to learn more about your siblings? See if they'd like to be interviewed. Get their permission, and you're good to go. Step 2, prepare for the interview. Prepare an introduction where you say your name, your interview name, the date, and the location. This way, anyone listening to the interview tomorrow or 50 years from now knows what they're listening to. And remember to always ask them if you have permission to record at the start of the interview. Then for questions, I always like to start an interview with, tell me about where you're from. Then you can prepare questions and topics based on what you already know, and then ask them maybe to talk about other moments in history they've lived through. We've also posted some sample questions for you. Step 3, remember to be an active listener. This means listen carefully and don't immediately jump to your next question. Remember to ask follow-up questions, and don't be afraid to say, tell me more about that. Step 4, recording the interview. Smartphones today have built-in recording software. For me, it's the voice memo app on my phone that will let me record an MP3 audio file. So what you'll do is you'll pull up the app, set the phone equally distant between you and your interviewee so it picks up on both of your voices. Then you hit record, you say your introduction, and you get started with your interview. Step 5, when you're done, thank your interviewee, stop the recording, send the recording to your email, maybe save it to the cloud, and then send it to friends and family. And now you have a piece of history that you can listen to and learn from. And with these steps, you have the base to start recording oral histories at home. Learn more about recording oral histories in here.
All right.
In here.
Okay, good. All right. So the reason I included that little video was because I like sort of at the end of my presentations, like last year I did a creative writing, and I sort of urged the audience to maybe take up some creative writing. Maybe, you know, if you're bored, maybe try writing a story, try writing a poem. You never know, you may have a talent for it. But I feel like, especially in these times where there's a lot of stuff going on and it's dangerous to go out and whatnot, it may be time to, you know, take some time and speak with your family, speak to members that you're really close with in the community, and try to get an understanding of where they come from, what their lives were like, and see if you can record that. See if they'd be interested in recording an interview, or I don't know, try to get their perspective of things. And I don't necessarily like to do call to actions, but I feel like after this project, I really feel like people could benefit from speaking to close family members, speaking to people that they trust within the community, and, you know, trying to open themselves up to new ideas, to new concepts, and then formulate their own sort of ideas off of the ideas of other people. And I feel like that could be a really cool aspect to do. And, you know, maybe while you're recording, you could even record an oral history, and maybe do a little oral history, a little something for the future, something that, you know, could come in handy when you're older. And it may be something nice to look back on as well. So for my presentation, that's pretty much it. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Let's see.
Nice job, Miles.
Thank you.
So for those of you who are tuning in, we'll open up the chat feature on the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can make comments and ask questions on there, and I'll read those aloud for Miles. While everyone's finding that. How would you compare this to last year's capstone? Do you feel like there was anything related in terms of your writing and research and work, or do you feel like they were pretty different?
As for this one, I feel like there was more of a gap, because the last one was a lot of like, you write every day, you go home, you write for 15 minutes, even if you have nothing to do, even if you have homework. But this one was more out on the edge. I tried some other stuff where I tried to do some volunteer work and factor that in, but it didn't fit. So it was a lot of trial and error in this project. But in the end, it sort of came out okay. That's what I would say.
Sounds like you got to learn a lot about your families in the process, and the
really
interesting stories about your grandfather versus your grandmother, and just their backgrounds in college and not college. It was really interesting. It must have been interesting for you, and good timing, you know, like you said, with the quarantine, we're stuck at home, and it's a good time to kind of learn more about each other. So we have one comment here from Tammy Afrigola. Wonderful job, she said.
Thank you, Mrs. Afrigola.
Seems like it also helped you a little bit with your post-secondary planning, sort of, you know, in terms of thinking about life after high school a little bit.
It definitely is a little bit scary, I'd say.
They always are.
The concept of, you know, not being home at this time of year, you know, getting ready for college, or it's just kind of crazy. I mean, in the future. So I don't know, but it definitely was an experience.
This is from your mentor, Allison Coleman. Do you have any tips or other students considering recording an oral history interview? Maybe questions that worked especially well, questions that weren't effective, or things you would do the same or differently?
Oh boy.
Do you want me to read it again?
Yes, please.
Okay, it was kind of long. Do you have any tips for other students considering recording an oral history interview? Maybe questions that worked especially well, questions that weren't effective, or things you would do the same or differently?
Okay. Tips for oral histories, basically. What would you do? What would you not do? I'd want to, for starters, for what I'd want to do differently, I'd want to interview more people. I'd want to open up, maybe not just people that I'm familiar with, but people that I don't know, to sort of get more, a wider scope on the interviews. As for, I can check the chat, right? Yeah. Okay. For tips for students, I'd say just really focus in on the time that you're spending while you're doing the interview. Try to absorb as much as you can from the people you're talking to, in hopes of getting a deeper understanding of where they come from. Sort of, so then when you go back to do your analyzing of what they were saying, you're able to get a real full understanding of who they are. You know what I mean? And
That's good advice.
yeah, I'm trying to look. Worked especially well. I don't know. I feel like opening up. I talked about people. You know, I asked them to do a funny story or something. And my grandfather. I don't think I mentioned this in my presentation, but his was. I wasn't. My dad didn't call me by my name until I was 18. I was just known as Hey You for for a long part of time. He talked about sort of, and so when you open it up to some sort of happy memories, you can then sort of transition into more heavier topics.
Sure.
But besides that, I don't really know. I don't know.
Good answer. And I think, I think Allison asked that question because you have so much to give to other people. And, you mentioned this last year in your presentation, encouraging those to get out there and write and try to write, even if you're scared. And I think, again, you're trying to promote that as well. So really happy to hear that you're continually encouraging people to come out of their comfort zone and try new things. I think that's great.
Thank you. That's really.
Well, if there's no other questions, that concludes our presentations for this evening.